Welcome back, everyone, to the Unseen Wisdom, where we like to, dive deep into some of the stories that are making headlines and, try to really unpack them.
Absolutely.
So don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe and all that good stuff.
Yeah, keep those notifications coming.
All right, so today we're going to be talking about something pretty disturbing, actually.
Yeah.
It's this incident that happened at Zanzou Nightclub in Pretoria, South Africa. And, there are just so many layers to this story.
Yeah, it's really troubling.
It brings up questions about safety and accountability and just the whole idea of, delayed justice.
Definitely.
So we're talking about an incident that actually happened way back in January of 2022.
Wow.
But it only came to light just recently in 2025 when these videos started circulating online. And they're pretty graphic.
It is really shocking to think that something like this could happen and then just stay hidden for so long.
I know, it's unbelievable. And I think that's one of the things that's really caught everyone's attention.
Right? Like, why now? Why did it take 3 years for this story to even come out?
Exactly. And I think that speaks volumes about the victims, and maybe the fear or shame they felt that prevented them from coming forward sooner.
You can only imagine what they must have gone through feeling like they couldn't speak out.
Just trying to put yourself in their shoes for a minute.
Right.
These were young guys celebrating their matriculation results with friends.
A happy occasion.
They're out at a nightclub, and then suddenly they're trapped in this absolute nightmare.
It's terrifying.
According to the victims, they were forced into a storeroom by bouncers and the manager of the club.
Oh my God.
And they were physically assaulted, they were waterboarded, and they were even coerced into performing these horrific acts on themselves.
That's just awful. And to think that a former bouncer who actually leaked the videos online, someone named Pablo, is claiming he'd seen similar things happen there before.
Right. So this wasn't necessarily a one-off incident.
It sounds like there might have been a culture of silence or even fear surrounding the club itself.
Which really makes you question the management.
Yeah.
Were they turning a blind eye to all of this?
Absolutely. Were they aware of what was going on and did nothing to stop it?
And now the police are searching for 8 suspects. All foreign nationals who they believe were involved.
That's a whole other layer to this story.
It is. And to make things even more complicated, Pablo, the guy who leaked the videos, might actually be implicated himself.
So he's a key witness, but also a potential suspect.
Yeah, it's tricky because on one hand, he's the reason this story even surfaced.
Right.
But his motives are definitely questionable, and his role in all of this needs to be investigated further.
And then there's the fact that the suspects were all foreign nationals, which I know is a sensitive topic.
Yeah, it raises these bigger questions about immigration control and, how thoroughly people are vetted when they come into the country.
Especially for jobs like security, where they're in positions of power.
Exactly. And on top of all of that, Pablo has also made some pretty serious allegations online, claiming that the management of Zanzou may have had connections with corrupt police officers.
Whoa, wow.
Which could explain why previous complaints against the club were supposedly dismissed.
So you're talking about a potential cover-up.
It's possible. And if that's true, it's just terrifying to think about.
I can see why people are so outraged.
Because it points to a much bigger problem within law enforcement.
Yeah.
It's
like a total breakdown in accountability.
Exactly. And people start to lose faith in the institutions that are supposed to protect them.
And it makes you wonder how widespread this kind of corruption might be.
And then, of course, we can't forget about the role of social media in all of this.
Right.
It was the online circulation of those videos that finally brought this whole thing to light.
It's definitely a double-edged sword in these situations because on the one hand, social media can expose injustice and give a voice to the voiceless, but on the other hand, it can also be a platform for spreading misinformation and, causing further harm.
Yeah, and it raises ethical questions about, how we share sensitive content, especially when it involves victims of trauma.
It's a tricky balance for sure.
And, this case has understandably sparked outrage across South Africa.
Yeah.
There's this growing demand for a thorough investigation and for all those responsible to be held accountable.
Absolutely.
But I think it's also important to look at how this incident connects to the wider social context in South Africa.
I agree. There are definitely some broader issues at play here.
We've seen concerns about violence and exploitation within the nightclub scene before.
And this case really brings those concerns into sharp focus.
It's a wake-up call in a lot of ways, I think.
Yeah, it makes you question the safety and vulnerability of young people, especially those who frequent these establishments.
Absolutely. And it underscores the need for a multi-pronged approach. Supporting the victims, ensuring they have access to justice and psychological help, and also implementing stricter regulations and enforcement in the nightclub industry itself.
You have to address the root causes as well as the immediate consequences.
Exactly.
And I think it also highlights the need for a shift in societal attitudes towards violence and abuse.
Right, like creating a culture where these things are simply not tolerated.
Exactly.
We've just scratched the surface of this story, but I think it's already clear that this is about so much more than just one nightclub.
It's a reflection of some deeper challenges within South African society.
It really is. And before we go any further, I think it's important for us to just take a moment to acknowledge the gravity of this situation. This isn't just some sensational news story. This is about real people who have been deeply affected. And it's a reminder of the unseen forces that shape our lives and the responsibilities we all share in creating a safer and more just world.
Absolutely.
So we've been talking about what happened at Zanzou and, the possibility that this goes even deeper than just this one incident.
Right. It seems like there are some pretty serious systemic issues at play here.
Yeah, and it's easy to get caught up in the immediate details, but I think it's crucial to step back and look at the bigger picture,
I completely agree. This incident, while horrific, might actually just be a symptom of these larger challenges that South Africa is facing.
Exactly, and we're talking about things like the erosion of trust in law enforcement, the vulnerability of young people, especially in these nightlife environments, and then the whole issue of immigration and how it impacts different sectors like security.
Yeah, and speaking of security, it's hard to ignore the fact that the people accused of carrying out this attack were bouncers.
Right.
Individuals who are literally entrusted with the safety of the patrons.
It makes you wonder about the kind of training and vetting processes they have in place for these security personnel.
That's a really important point, and I think it deserves more attention. Like, if people with violent tendencies or even criminal backgrounds are slipping through the cracks and getting hired as bouncers, that's a huge red flag.
And it raises the question of who's ultimately responsible.
Right.
Like, do nightclub owners and managers have a moral and legal obligation to ensure the safety of their patrons?
I think they absolutely do. There's a duty of care involved there.
And if they're turning a blind eye to potential risks or not taking the necessary security measures, are they complicit?
I would say so. They can't just shift the blame onto the security personnel.
And this brings us back to those allegations of police corruption that we were talking about.
Yeah.
If those claims about Zanzou's management having connections with corrupt officers turn out to be true.
Well, that paints a very disturbing picture.
It does, because then you're talking about this network of complicity that allows establishments like Zanzou to operate without any real consequences.
It's like a system designed to protect the perpetrators and silence the victims.
And imagine if complaints against a nightclub are routinely dismissed or ignored because of these corrupt relationships.
That's just terrifying to think about.
It is, and the impact on public trust in the police force would be devastating.
It would completely erode that trust.
And so we need to talk about transparency and accountability within law enforcement.
Absolutely, those are crucial.
But I also think this case highlights a broader issue of social responsibility. Like, what can we as individuals and as a society do to prevent things like this from happening again?
Well, for starters, I think we need to foster a culture where there's zero tolerance for violence and abuse.
Right.
And that starts with education, with raising awareness and having open and honest conversations about things like toxic masculinity, the dangers of alcohol abuse, and how violence has become normalized in certain segments of society.
It's about changing those deep-seated attitudes and behaviors.
Exactly. And we also need to empower bystanders to intervene safely and effectively when they see something that's not right.
Because often there's this sense of apathy or fear of getting involved.
Yeah, people think it's not their business or they're afraid of the consequences.
But even small acts of intervention can make a difference.
They absolutely can. It's about creating a collective sense of responsibility for the safety and well-being of others.
And challenging that mindset of, it's none of my business.
Right. We all need to feel empowered to speak up and take action against injustice.
I think this incident has been a wake-up call for a lot of people in South Africa.
I think so too.
It's forced us to confront some really uncomfortable truths about the state of our society.
And the challenges that we face.
But now that we have this collective awareness, it's crucial to channel that into constructive action.
Absolutely. We can't let this be just another news story that fades away.
This isn't just about seeking justice for the victims of Zanzou. It's about creating a safer and more just society for everyone.
I couldn't agree more.
We've covered a lot of ground in this conversation, but there's one more critical aspect of this story that we haven't really talked about yet. We've talked about the incident itself and, all the potential systemic issues and the broader social context. But throughout this whole conversation, there's one group we haven't really talked about.
Yeah.
and those are the victims.
You're absolutely right. It's so easy to get caught up in the big picture stuff,
Right.
like the calls for justice and systemic change.
Right.
But we can't forget that at the heart of all of this are real individuals who've been through something truly horrific.
I mean, it's hard to even fathom what they must be going through right now. The physical and psychological scars of an experience like that.
They're going to be dealing with the effects of this for a long time.
And, they were out celebrating their matriculation results.
A time that should have been full of excitement and hope for the future.
Exactly. And instead, they were subjected to this horrifying ordeal, and it's left them traumatized.
There's no doubt about that.
And so their road to recovery is going to be long and challenging.
Absolutely.
And they're going to need specialized psychological support and a compassionate environment where they can heal at their own pace.
It's crucial that they get the help they need to process this trauma, and to rebuild their lives and hopefully find some sense of justice and closure.
We've talked a lot about holding the perpetrators accountable and, making systemic changes.
Right.
But justice for the victims goes beyond just legal proceedings.
It does.
It's about ensuring they have access to the resources and support they need to move forward from this experience.
Absolutely. Justice has so many different facets to it. It's about holding people accountable, yes.
Right.
But it's also about providing that comprehensive support to victims.
Yes.
And not just in the immediate aftermath, but in the long term as well.
Like counseling, medical care,
Yeah.
legal aid, anything that can help them on their journey to recovery.
Exactly.
This whole case has really been a stark reminder that as a society, we need to do better.
It really has.
We need to create a culture where violence and abuse are simply not tolerated,
Where victims feel safe coming forward.
and where justice is served for everyone.
That's the goal.
And so it comes down to this, what does all of this mean for you listening right now?
All right, what can we do?
How can we contribute to creating a society where these kinds of incidents are less likely to occur?
Well, I think it starts with awareness, paying attention to what's happening in our communities.
Right.
Not turning a blind eye to violence or abuse.
Picking up.
If you see something, say something.
Report it.
Support organizations that are working to combat violence and promote safety.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things is to talk to the people in our lives.
Our friends, our families, our children.
Let them know that it's okay to speak up, that they don't have to suffer in silence.
Exactly. Break this out.
Let's break the cycle of violence and create a future where everyone feels safe and respected.
That's what we should all be striving for.
Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the Zanzou nightclub incident.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's a tough topic, but it's an important one. I think we all have a role to play in addressing these issues.
I agree.
Keep the conversation going in the comments. Let us know your thoughts, and we'll see you next time on The Unseen Wisdom.